Hey, what's up guys, the Lone Top 10s here with another awesome video just for you. While relatively recent occurrences have brought the term into the US lexicon, regime change is as American as apple pie. For nearly all of the country's history, but especially since the 20th century began, the US has deemed it necessary to meddle in the fortunes of other countries, often under the guise of protecting national security, though you'll soon see that there are often ulterior motives. Without further ado, here are the 10 worst occurrences of regime change by the USA. So first of all, start off with the number 10, the Syrian coup d'etat. Now, the extent of US involvement in the bloodless coup, which overthrew the secular democracy that had sprung up in Syria after World War II, has been disputed ever since. The popular opinion is that in 1949 the CIA decided that their best bet to further US interests in the area would be to encourage a coup d'etat in the country. A proposed construction project, the Trans-Arabian Pipeline, was in danger of not being built under the rule of Sharaki Kuwaiti. And if there's one thing that gets America's goal, it's being denied oil. Therefore, a shyster by the name of Husni el-Zayem, convicted less than a decade earlier for graft, was propped up by the CIA, and he led an overthrow of Syria's democratically elected president. Almost immediately, the pipeline plans were approved, as were a number of pro-American initiatives, such as peaceful negotiations with Israel. The first Arab-Israel war had just ended the year before. However, just 4 months after he assumed power, al-Zayem himself was deposed, shot by a strongman who managed to rule for about 5 years before he was deposed as well. Nearly 2 decades of coup after coup ensured, until Hafez al-Assad took power in 1971, and reigned for 30 years after his death, which unfortunately Bashar al-Assad had ruled after Hafez, which he's still currently under rule, and he's just awful, trust me. Number 9, Operation PB Success. Like another of others, the US orchestrated regime change, which took place in Guatemala in 1954, happened because communism was supposedly gaining a foothold in the country. The second democratically elected president of the country, Jacobo Arbenz, instituted a number of land reforms, populist actions meant to improve the lives of the poorest Guatemalans. The CIA didn't feel the same way and almost immediately put a target on its back. Targets can be interpreted both figuratively and literally. Assassination was an option up until Arbenz resigned. In addition, United Fruit, a U.S. company which held quite a bit of land in Guatemala, suffered under the reforms mostly due to the ending of their exploitative labor practices, and they lobbied the U.S. government to intervene. Now, Operation PB Success, a plan for psychological warfare and political action, was authorized by President Eisenhower back in 1953. In addition, the CIA trained and funded a paramilitary group led by Castillo Armas, which attempted to violently overthrow Arbenz, though they met with a number of setbacks. The threat of U.S. intervention, thanks to the propaganda, which was part of Operation PB Success PB Success, was enough to force Arbenz's resignation. 10 days later, Armas took power, instituted 4 decades of authoritarian rule, which decimated Guatemala's population, thanks to near continuous and bloody civil war. Gather your guns, everyone. The coup was widely reviled by the international community, with comparing Americans to colonists or Hitler speaking about Austria. Just to think about it. Number 8, Operation Urgent Fury. Now, Grenada is a small island in the Caribbean, just like 400 miles south of Puerto Rico. And as locals say, it's just south of paradise, just north of frustration. For President Lincoln, it was a constant frustration, with Marxists having controlled the country since the offset of his presidency. In 1983, fed up with what they deemed insufficiently radicalized behavior, members of the ruling party executed their leader, replacing him with Hudson Austin, a general in the People's Revolutionary Army of Grenada. This was a straw that broke the camel's back for the Americans, and plans were quickly drawn up to invade the island. Trouble started immediately, creating problems which would last for much of Operation Urgent Fury, which is like about a couple months, as the various branches of the military couldn't agree on what to do. In the end, over 7,000 troops were landed in Grenada with a number of different goals to achieve, chief among them being the removal of the current regime. The rescue of American students in the country was also as an excuse for the invasion. Faced against the might of the U.S. military, Austin's government quickly folded, replaced by pro-U.S. leadership. When asked about the nearly unanimous international outrage concerning the invasion, Reagan simply replied, "It didn't upset my breakfast at all." Well, how about a little bit of trivia? My grandpa was involved in this war, so just give us some extra praise for that. Alright, anyway, number 7, the Iraq War. It's very simple on why the Iraq War began in the first place. Just to remove Saddam Hussein. The reason was because he had, George Bush said that he has lots of weapons of mass destruction. In reality, he actually had any, and was increasingly cooperating with UN inspectors. However, President Bush argued against those claims, eventually giving Hussein an ultimatum: leave the country or face invasion, with lots of guns. Now, despite fervent international protests, the US and the rest of the coalition forces began hostiles when the deadline came and went. Although the conventional warfare was quickly over, as the Iraqis were no match for their foes, insurgents continued to be a thorn in the side and increasingly isolate American presence for many years afterward. Though the eventual outcome of the US intervention was yet to be determined, deeming the action a success is seemingly impossible given the nearly 200,000 civilian deaths that resulted from the conflict. Now, I could argue that the Iraq War didn't actually end until 2011 because of Al-Qaeda and ISIS trying to attack Iraq. And then, the US military decided to leave Iraq, and boom. However, we're still dealing with ISIS, so they're technically still there. Alright, number 6, the First Cacao War. By 1915, after 4 years of constant political turmoil, the US government saw the island nation of Haiti as a problem which could be only solved by force. Well, we have to get rid of all the corruption, so that's definitely a good reason. Villebrand Guillaume Sam, a ruthless dictator best known for his political executions, was ousted that year by the same forces, which happened behind the last 6 coups. Haitian peasant militias, known as Cacos, faced with an increasingly smaller chance of recovering the debts owed to them. France, England, Germany, and the US sent troops to that area. Well, that was during World War I, unfortunately, so. However, it was the American forces who landed first, initially meeting with little resistance, a populist notion that had helped instigate the latest coup, and the Cacos were reluctant to give up as they had in the past. A brief guerrilla war, the First Cacao War, began and lasted for a few months, until U.S. Marines stormed Fort Riviere, the final stronghold of the Cacos. A pro-America politician named Philippe Cedra Guaniva assumed control of the country and remained in power till 1922. U.S. forces remained in Haiti till 1934, when President Roosevelt transferred authority to the Garde de Haiti, which, Alright, number 5, Operation Just Cause. This is obviously located in Panama, so here's how it works. In 1989, a dictator by the name of Manuel Noriega had been ruling for about 6 years over there, since 1983, trafficking cocaine and helping the CIA with the various covert military operations across Latin America. By 1986, he had outlived his usefulness, and there were reports that he was a double agent. The U.S. court convicted him on drug charges a few years later. Much of his involvement with the CIA came out as a result of various scandals, including the infamous Iran-Contra affair, which that was the only time the US actually supported Iran during the Iran-Iraq War, in case if you guys don't know that. Anyway, the 1989 elections resulted in the win by Guillermo Endara, the head of the anti-Noriega Democratic Alliance of Civic Opposition. Angered by the fact that his hand-picked winner was defeated, Noriega declared the elections void and asserted him as the de facto ruler of the country. Public pressure mounted on the U.S. government in the form of various claims of softness on drug crime and the apparent escalation of threats against Americans living in that country, Panama. So, now on December 20th, U.S. troops landed in a number of different spots with the intent of taking several strategically important sites. Noriega was eventually captured at the Vatican mission in Panama City after he surrendered due to a combination of diplomatic pressure from the Vatican and constant rock music, which Noriega actually hated. And Dora was later sworn into office, so that's pretty good. Noriega's gone. Hopefully he's in jail. Alright, let's go on to number 4 with the Hereda toppling. The year was 1913. 3 years of bloody conflict had resulted in a number of overthrown Mexican presidents. And after a particularly violent series of days known as the 10 Tragic Days, General Victoriano Huerta was installed as president. However, the U.S. under President Wilson was initially reluctant to recognize the duly minted dictator, instead hoping for democratic elections, which obviously Mexico needs to be a democracy and not a dictatorship. A year later, 9 American sailors were arrested for allegedly entering a prohibited area in Mexican territory, setting off what would be known as the Tampico Affair. If coincidentally, Tampico is actually a city in Illinois where Ronald Reagan was born. Just a little bit trivia, just for you. There were then paraded around the city, enraging the regional U.S. naval commander. Ultimatums were issued, and when Mexico refused, President Wilson sent Marines to the port city of Veracruz. A relatively short battle ensued. The U.S. forces took control of the city, only relinquishing it when Hereda resigned from office. Later, Hereda was contracted by German intelligence, who planned to use him to get the U.S. bogged down in a war with Mexico. As he was sent back to Mexico from his then home in New York, he was captured by U.S. forces, who promptly charged him with sedition. He later died while in custody, so that's pretty good. Number 3, the Puerto Rican Campaign. During the Spanish-American War in 1898, a number of Spanish holdings in the Western Hemisphere were the site of conflict between the two countries, including the small Caribbean island of Puerto Rico. Less than a month after the onset of the war, U.S. naval forces attacked San Juan, establishing the blockade. Eventually, land forces were deployed, and only after 7 deaths, the U.S. secured the island. The war ended soon after, and Spain ceded a number of territories, including Cuba, the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico. Though U.S. control of Cuba was temporary from the onset, the other 3 territories were initially going to be permanent. Almost immediately, Puerto Rico came under the leadership of various military officers, who set about to Americanize the population, mostly through the use of schools and mandatory lessons in English. It would be another 54 years until the citizens of Puerto Rico were allowed to democratically elect their own leader, though they remained a territory of the U.S. Number 2. The Tropajaks Project. In the early 1950s, Mohammad Mossadegh was the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran in an effort to gain more national control over their oil fields. He began to audit the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, a British business. American fears were, as with many other similar examples, that the country would fall under the sway of the Soviet Union. Despite to keep communism from taking hold in Iran, the CIA began planning to overthrow Mossadegh, hoping to reaffirm Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi's power as monarch and install General Fazlollah Zahedi as the new leader of the country. A joint task force of American and British intelligence began funneling money to various groups within Iran, who undertook terror plots designed to underdetermine public confidence in Mossadegh's government. The coup was successful in 1953. Number 1. The depositing of Queen Liliuokalani. This was back in 1893. This is when Hawaii was eventually turned to the U.S. Now, however, Sanfordale, yes, I mean of the Dole Food Company, the missionary party assumed control of the country, establishing a provincial government with the stated control of getting the islands inside by the U.S. However, Hawaii gets to be a territory until 1959 when it becomes a state. Anyway guys, that is it. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and see you guys next time. Take care.